As I navigated my life in Riverton, I always felt like a ghost in my own family. The air was thick with unspoken resentments. My father, the anchor of our household, wore a permanent look of stern seriousness. He was a man who commanded respect yet rarely offered warmth. I often found myself standing in the corner of the living room, feeling utterly invisible, my heart tightening as I watched my younger brother being showered with affection that I had longed for. That day I lingered by the half-open door to the small office off the living room, a place where important conversations took place. I could hear my father's deep voice like a rolling wave, full of assurance and enthusiasm. It was a familiar tune, one that had too often left me feeling like an outsider in my own home. "Of course, I can help with the loan, Mark," my father said, his tone bright and proud. He met my brother, bursting into adulthood like a flower in spring while I wilted in the winter of neglect. "$50,000 will give you a solid jumpstart for that business idea of yours. I believe in you, son." Those 5 words, the words I had waited for, yearned for, floated in the air like smoke, and they stung as they curled around my heart. I had never heard those words directed at me. "I believe in you." I felt a surge of raw energy through my veins as indignation bubbled up, mixing with the thick, sour emotion of jealousy. I clenched my fists until my knuckles turned white, each breath growing more labored. "You know how much I want to make my own mark," my brother replied, a hint of excitement in his voice. "I want to build something from the ground up, just like you did." "And you will," my father promised. "You have your mother's talent for creativity and your father's knack for business. This loan will put you on the right path." Even my brother's pride felt like a stake in my chest. Pride implied acknowledgement. Acknowledgement I did not have. I could see the eager grin spreading across his face. It was infuriating, watching the two of them, father and son, bonded by dreams and trust, while I stood in the shadows like a forgotten child. A ghost in my own family, watched but never truly seen. I was only a mere whisper in conversations weighed down by abundance. As they continued discussing my brother's plans, I could not bear to listen any longer. I slipped away from the door and made my way down the narrow hallway, my fingers grazing the cold walls as I tried to ground myself in something real. I turned into the small kitchen, the familiar sight of stacked dishes in the sink somehow soothing yet frustrating. Light from the window cast a bittersweet glow over everything, illuminating the remnants of countless meals prepared for a family while I too often dined alone. I opened the fridge, hoping to drown my thoughts with food, but all I found were half-eaten takeout containers and wilted vegetables, the consequences of my long shifts at work and late nights studying. I reached for a neglected bowl of wilted lettuce, but my fingers hesitated in midair, and I dropped it back into the fridge with a resigned sigh. "Hey Mia," my brother's voice boomed as he strolled into the kitchen, a whirlwind of youthful optimism. "Did you hear? Dad is helping me out with the business loan. $50,000. Can you believe it? This is my chance." My heart sank further into my stomach, a cold pit of despair opening inside me. I forced a smile that felt more like a grimace. "Yeah, I heard," I managed, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. "Congratulations." "Thanks, it really means a lot to me." He leaned against the counter, his casual confidence radiating like warmth from the oven. "With that kind of cash, I can finally buy the equipment I need. I already have some ideas for the design. Just imagine, I could revolutionize things. I can't wait to tell my friends." "Revolutionize things, huh? Sounds lofty," I said, trying to suppress the rising tide of resentment in my chest. I knew I should be supportive. He was my brother. But it felt impossible to share in his excitement when I had spent my own time scraping by. "Lofty? Nah, it's realistic. I can show everyone what I can do." His enthusiasm was infectious, but it pierced my heart like a dagger. "I've been dreaming of this forever." "Good for you," I said, betraying more than a hint of sarcasm. "It must be nice to have a dad who believes in your ambitions." His expression shifted slightly, a flicker of confusion crossing his face. "What do you mean?" I felt a wild surge of anger rising inside me, and I realized I had reached the tipping point. "I mean, it must be nice to know that your father supports you, to know that you matter, to know that you can actually take risks because you have that safety net beneath you. You know, the one that apparently doesn't exist for me." He stared at me stunned. "Mia, come on, you know Dad cares about you. It's just some things take priority." "Priority? I'm not even on the list." I snapped back, feeling the tears prick at my eyes. "It's always about you. You're the golden boy, Mark. You can do no wrong. I'm relegated to the sidelines, just a shadow." "That's not fair," he said, his voice softening but still carrying that edge of youthful defensiveness. "You're overreacting. You know how hard Dad works. He's trying to support both of us." "Is he?" I bit back, my voice rising again. "Because it sure doesn't feel that way. It feels like I'm invisible. I work late shifts to make tuition payments while you get everything handed to you on a silver platter. I've put in enough hours in this family. I should be recognized, not overlooked." "Mia, calm down," he said, raising his hands as if to diffuse the magnitude of my growing frustration. "I really do think." "No, you don't think," I cried, my words spiraling uncontrollably. "And you're too wrapped up in your dream to see what's happening around you. I'm not just angry about the money. I'm angry because the love and support you receive are the things I've always wanted. I'm not just your sister, I'm a person with worth too. But you know Dad loves you. He always speaks highly of you," he argued, though his own voice broke slightly. "You're an amazing student. You work harder than anyone else just to make it through. He appreciates that, he really does." Hearing him say that made my heart twist, but my anger didn't subside. Appreciation doesn't pay bills, Mark. I spat out, the fire of resentment combining with the cold steel of loneliness. If being amazing meant something, then why is he drowning you in cash and ignoring my struggles? Look, I'm sorry it feels that way, he said cautiously, an awkwardness creeping into his voice. But maybe if you talk to Dad instead of resenting him so much, talk to him. Do you really think that will change anything? My tone was sharp, cutting through the air between us like a blade. How can I even bring it up? Dad, can I have the same support you give Mark? That would go over swimmingly. I'm just the ghost that haunts his home, remember? Mia, please, he pleaded, his eyes widening with worry. You don't have to be like this. I'm trying to share my excitement with you. Excitement? What about my victories, my hard work? What about me? I felt the tears slide down my cheeks, hot and heavy as they fell. When will it be my turn? His expression turned pained, as if my words were daggers that pierced his heart. A deep silence enveloped us, punctuated by the ticking of the kitchen clock, each tick sounding louder than the last. In that moment, I could sense my brother grappling with the weight of our reality. Deep down, I wanted to believe he understood. I never meant to hurt you, Mia, he finally said, his voice cracking just a touch. But these plans, they have been my dreams, too. Can't we find a way to work together? I know Dad wants to help both of us. Let's help each other out instead of fighting. It struck me then, this environment was not just a resentment for our father's favoritism, but for the lack of communication between us. I laughed, though it felt more like a choked sob. Help each other out, you don't understand. How can I trust our father's support if my value only comes after yours? He opened his mouth to reply but then closed it, the words hanging heavily in the air like a thick mist. I saw his gaze shift, a dawning realization flickering in his eyes. It was clear he did not grasp the depths of my pain, and that hurt me even more. I turned away, needing to escape the suffocating feelings swirling in the small kitchen, but not before hearing his voice once more. I want us to be okay, Mia, he said softly. You mean a lot to me. I took a shaky breath, unwilling to look back or let my vulnerability show. Yeah, me too, I murmured, my heart still heavy but dimly hopeful. But as the door of that office swung wide open again, I knew deep down that I had begun plotting my own course, my own revenge on the betrayal that had landed like a heavy fog over us. It was time to make a move, but first I needed to think. So I steeled myself, letting the warmth of my brother's words wash over me for a moment longer before drifting back into the shadows, the place where I had always belonged. This time, however, it would be with a plan. It was the beginning of something new, but not the kind they expected. It would be my way of breaking free, fueled by indignation and betrayal. I refused to wallow in despair. As I stared out the window of my small, cluttered apartment, the city lights flickered like the last whispers of hope. I could hear my father and brother laughing from the living room, a shared joke over a business idea they had, one that they revered as a potential gold mine. Little did they know the storm brewing just beyond the walls. Their carefree voices drifted through, perfectly encapsulating the obliviousness that infuriated me more by the hour. My heart raced with a mix of anger and desperation. I had to take charge of my own destiny. I had to prove to them that I was more than just the shadow of their success. But how, during those sleepless nights, I found solace in the company of my closest friends. One by one, I invited them into my plan, wrapping them into the chaos I had become. We gathered at the local diner, where the smell of greasy burgers mingled with the thick coffee that kept us fueled. It was there, under the dim glow of fluorescent lights, that ideas sparked. Our murmurs of ambition filled the air like static electricity. Are you really sure about this? My friend Sarah asked, her brow furrowed with concern as she took a sip from her coffee. I mean, your dad is basically throwing his success in your face. I nodded, gripping the edges of the table, forcing a smile even as uncertainty weighed heavily on my chest. I have to do this for me. I cannot keep living in his shadow. This is my chance to shine. "'Kay, I'm in," Hunter announced, slapping the table with determination. "What's the plan?" We spent countless nights researching and drafting a business plan that would rival any corporate giant. I felt alive, teeth gritted and fingers dancing across a keyboard as I poured my aspirations onto the screen. I was no longer just being swept away in their fantasies, I was building my own. Each data point, every projection, felt like the fabric of my future mixed with the taste of revenge I craved. Yet as each day slipped by, the weight of financial strain settled on my shoulders, the clouds darkening and looming ever closer. I meticulously set a budget, using every dollar I could find. I sold the few possessions I could part with, juggled bills, and made ruthless cuts to my groceries. We can't fall behind, I reminded my friends as we gathered at my kitchen table, coffee cups scattered among notebooks like war casualties. Are you sure you want to keep throwing your money at this? Sarah's voice wavered as she flipped through our latest projections. The numbers don't quite add up. They will, I insisted, a desperate edge creeping into my tone. I could feel my heart beating louder than ever, a frantic rhythm against the backdrop of doubt. I know if we just push a little harder, we can get it off the ground. I looked around, convincing myself just as much as I was attempting to convince them. Their faces were soft with concern, but they nodded and resumed their work. With each passing week, we grew closer to launching. I could feel it in my bones, this was my rightful place. Yet the loneliness clawed at me as the nights grew longer. They would go home to their families, their laughter ringing in my ears while I sat in isolation, my dreams unspooling like a fraying thread. My father and brother lived in a world tinted with success, while I was the underdog battling the gusts of financial despair. Then, just when I thought I was on the brink of success, the universe threw a cruel twist my way. I sat in the same diner, fumbling through financial statements stacked as high as my hopes. My hands trembled as I glanced at the latest figures. The vendor I planned to partner with suddenly raised their fees. They had found larger clients, and I was just another voice that fell by the wayside. No, 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 I whispered in disbelief, rechecking the figures. A feeling of nausea surfaced, and I set my coffee cup down hard on the table, sucking in a panicked breath as the clatter drew curious glances from across the room. "What's wrong?" Sarah asked, her eyes widening. "The vendor," I choked out, desperately trying to hold back the tears. They doubled their fees. I can't afford this. What do we do?" Hunter shifted in his seat, glancing at Sarah for reassurance. "Can we cut some costs somewhere else? It doesn't matter, there isn't enough time." My voice trembled, the indignation I had harnessed transforming into despair. I'm done being the person who struggles in their shadows. This was my dream, and it's disappearing." I buried my face in my hands, the enormity of it all crashing down around me. "Look, we can figure this out," Sarah soothed, but her words felt like empty promises echoing through my mind. I could see their faces above me, concern washing over them, but I was spiraling down a tunnel where I could barely see the light. "We can look for more investors or—" "No," I interrupted, shaking my head violently, frustration boiling over into anger. "I am not begging anyone for anything. I refuse to play victim to their success." "But we started this together," Hunter protested gently. "You can't just give up. You are so close." "Close." I practically spat out the word, my feelings of betrayal whirling uncontrollably. "Look around. I am as far as I've ever been from anything. With every dollar I put in, it feels like I'm tossing it into a void. I want my chance." The dim diner felt like a circus now, a cacophony of voices blurring around us while I wrestled with the darkness creeping into my mind. My people, Eddie's cheerful murmurs of laughter, my father's dominating presence, reminded me that they were unaware of my internal struggles. They were lost in their world of unwarranted fame while I was fighting the very fabric of my existence. Hours later, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I found myself wandering the streets, fury mixing with hopelessness. My heart thudded loudly, a drum marking the solitude that surrounded me. My palms began to itch with the need to take action, yet my mind stirred in a whirl of uncertainty. Would my effort mean anything? Was I destined to remain in the shadows? Each step felt heavy, as if the ground itself conspired against me. I needed to reclaim my power. I needed to manipulate the very forces that had led me to this chaos. "I will not let them win," I whispered. My thoughts began to clear as I stumbled onto a path I had previously overlooked. What if I could turn this setback into an opportunity? What if I could find a way to use their own success against them? My brother's boasting, my father's arrogance, it all screamed for retribution. I could almost hear their laughter ringing in my ears, echoing the disgust I felt towards them. Alone at last, I envisioned what my revenge could be. It would involve careful plotting, strategic sabotage, exposing the cracks in their gilded facade. I was not the victim, I was the storm that would break their illusions. The bitterness inside me twisted into determination. I could reclaim my narrative, wielding it like a sword against those who had underestimated me. The gears in my mind began to turn as I strolled purposively. I could rise from this rubble, knowing that the very strength of my decisions would echo in the bemused faces of my father and brother. With each thought, I felt the weight lift from my shoulders. Those nights spent in solitude became fuel for my newfound resolve, and I began to sketch the first lines of my new dream. That old dream was cast aside, it no longer mattered. The clarity in my heart opened pathways I had never seen before. In that moment of darkness, perhaps the battle was not lost after all. Maybe this turbulent storm could lead me to a clearer sky, a new dawn of my making. I was no longer the shadow living in their wake. I was the storm destined to shake their world to its core. And as the night enveloped me, I could almost taste the imminent change. As sweet and intoxicating as revenge itself, desperation clawed at my heart like a wild animal, demanding that I just pack it all in and give up. But my rage drove me harder than ever, pushing me past my limits and into uncharted territories of strength and determination. With the weight of my family's neglect pressing against my soul like an anchor, I dug deeper within myself, determined to see this through to the end, determined to finally be seen. I had always been the overlooked one, lost in the shadows of my brother's bright achievements and my parents' unending favoritism, the one consistently left behind. No one took any notice as I transformed my pain into fuel, and now I was ready to confront the very people who had pushed me aside. Every dawn felt like a new mountain to climb as I took on odd jobs during the day. I worked at the local cafe, my hands growing calloused from the constant scrubbing and sweeping, from serving coffee to impatient customers who ignored their surroundings. As I struggled on the line, the smell of burnt coffee beans wafted through the air, mixing with the sweet aroma of fresh pastries. The grind of the espresso machine was a backdrop to my inner turmoil, and while my body ached, my mind buzzed with plans. The tint of morning gray would seep into my clothes, but behind my tired eyes lay a flicker of something stronger, an unwavering belief that I could create something beautiful out of this mess. At night, after long shifts, I would come home, weary but filled with a ferocity that kept my heart beating against despair. My small apartment turned into a war room, an elaborate workshop where I poured my heart and soul into every detail of my burgeoning business. I transformed my living room into a chaotic yet organized space filled with sketches of my brand, fabric swatches strewn across the couch, and piles of prototypes stacked neatly against the walls. My fingers would often ache from sewing late into the night, but every stitch whispered resilience. Finally, luck graced me with a breakthrough, and I could hardly believe it when I received the approval for a small line of credit to keep my business afloat. The rush of excitement was like a cool breeze washing over me, something I had yearned for in my darkest hours. Now was my chance to show the world what I could do, what I could create. Weeks turned into months, filled with long nights, tearful failures, and a thrill that sparked each time I found myself inching closer to my dream. When the day came for the family gathering, I felt the tremor of inevitability coursing through me, electrifying my every nerve. The gathering would take place in our parents' home, a place filled with echoes of the golden moments I had never truly belonged to, where my brother's laughter lingered like native perfume, rich but bittersweet. I could almost see the bright strings of my family's fabric, but woven into that intricate design was a thread of pain, the thread that was my story. As I stood in front of the mirror that morning, the reflection staring back at me was someone transformed, someone who had finally embraced their strength. My heart raced as I donned my carefully chosen outfit, each piece meticulously selected to reflect my brand's identity. I could already feel the weight of eyes upon me, the anticipation dancing in the air like a current. It was now or never, and I inhaled, grounding myself in the promise of this moment. When I arrived at the gathering, my family was already buzzing with excitement. The dining table, adorned with an array of their favorite dishes, overflowed with smiles and laughter. I stood in the doorway at first, taking a moment to savor the whirlwind of noise, absorbing the warmth that enveloped the room. But there, among the joyful chatter, I noticed a familiar face illuminating with pride, the expression of my brother, filled with an arrogance I had come to loathe, shining brighter than the chandelier above. He was the golden child, the one everyone looked up to, and I felt my pulse quicken, rage bubbling below the surface as I clutched the small parcel containing my brand close to my chest. "Hey Mia, you made it." My brother stepped forward, his voice oozing with feigned warmth. "It's about time. We were just about to start without you." "Nice to see you too," I replied, my voice steady despite the tempest brewing within. "I hope you saved some room because I've brought something special." "What do you mean?" He chuckled, glancing toward our parents. "Did you bring another one of your experiments?" "I have a lot more than that," I said, forcing a smile. The corners of my mouth tugged upwards, but my heart raced on a different path, leading me closer to my moment of reckoning. I could feel their eyes drifting toward me, curiosity mingling with skepticism. They had always dismissed my dreams, swatted them away like pesky flies buzzing around their perfect family bubble. But today, I was ready to break that bubble. "Everyone gather around," I shouted, my voice carrying an assertive edge that silenced the room. All heads turned towards me, their expressions flickering from surprise to utter disbelief. I could hear the whispers, the curious murmurs behind pressed lips. "What does she have?" With trembling hands, I revealed my brand to them for the first time. I pulled the item from the parcel, holding it up for them to see, feeling a swell of confidence coursing through me, one born from every sleepless night I had endured. "This is what I have been working on," I announced, parading the vibrant fabric before their eyes. "This is my brand, inspired by resilience and defined by passion. It represents everything you all have overlooked." The room fell silent, palpable tension tangling with the air, and I could practically hear the echo of disbelief as it ricocheted off the walls. My brother's face was the crowning image of shock, disbelief etched into every feature. His perfect world cracked just enough for me to slip through, my heart racing as I seized the moment. I felt a surge of triumph rising within, warm and bright, radiating through me like the sun breaking through stormy clouds. "What is this? Some kind of joke?" My brother finally stammered, stepping closer, scrutinizing the fabric as if it might dissolve in front of him. "Seriously, this is your big reveal?" "Yes," I shot back, my voice firm. "This is real. I have put everything into this. You have no idea what I have sacrificed for this, and your disbelief only fuels my fire." His shock turned to a defeated chuckle, and I felt a flame ignite in my chest. The faces around us began to soften, the edges of skepticism fading as realization dawned upon them. They were witnessing a new version of me, a version they had underestimated for too long. "I can see you have been working hard," one of our aunts interjected, her eyes glistening as she inspected the fabric. "This is impressive, Mia, really." "Thank you," I breathed, the warmth enveloping me momentarily, but I couldn't allow myself to bask in it just yet. "It's not just impressive, it's a statement. I am here and I will not be ignored any longer." "What's next then?" my brother asked, trying to regain his composure but failing miserably as the doubt crept into his tone. "You think just because you made a pretty piece of fabric it means something? Definitely more than the record you set in our parents' eyes," I replied, my words sharper than intended, each syllable dripping with the poison of years of neglect. "I'm going to launch my line next month, and I would love for you to see how successful I will be, since your opinion seems to matter so much." The laughter in the room faded away into a whispering worry. They exchanged cautious glances, realizing they were witnessing what they had recklessly overlooked all these years. I stood tall, my legs strong beneath me, as I embraced the tumult and triumph all within the same heartbeat. Amidst the chaos of emotions, I spotted my mother, who had remained silent through the exchange, her brow furrowed as she processed the scene. I stepped forward, drawn to her to seek her reaction, yearning to understand whether or not she could finally see me. "Mia, this is really something," she finally said, her voice softer now, almost vulnerable. "I wish we had known how hard you were working." "Maybe if you had looked," I challenged gently, and I felt the weight of the past hanging between us, the unfulfilled years in which I had begged for recognition. "I see you now," she replied, her eyes meeting mine, a flicker of sadness appearing as she reached out, stroking my hand. I felt her warmth reminding me of our bond, the kinship that was slightly thawing. As the dust of disbelief settled in the room, there was a union forming around me. What I had created was more than just fabric, it was my spirit poured into every inch. Every sacrifice, every drop of sweat, and every tear had culminated in this moment. It was sweet and bittersweet, holding the promise of a future where I would no longer be the overlooked sister. And there it was, the sun breaking through the clouds, illuminating me in their gaze. For the very first time, the room was heavy with the kind of silence that followed an explosion, the air thick with disbelief as my family processed the seismic shift taking place. My father, his brow furrowed deep with confusion, sat at the edge of his seat, the faint whir of the ceiling fan battling against the oppressive tension filling the space around us. My brother remained stock still, his once confident demeanor crumbling into a shell of uncertainty as I laid out my achievements like a fertile field blossoming in the spring, a field where he had long believed only he could sow seeds of success. I could see it flickering in the depth of their eyes, the widening disbelief, the fluttering envy, and the unmistakable dawning realization that things were now not as they once had been. As I spoke, I took a moment to relish it. My business was not just thriving, it was booming, the numbers etched into my mind like a mantra. "Last quarter our sales soared past $500,000, I said, my tone steady but exuberant, each word dripping with the satisfaction of victory. "That profit margin is the highest this company has ever seen." I leaned forward, my heart swelling with pride, my voice growing stronger. "And that's not just a fluke. With the new product line I've been developing, projections for next year suggest we could easily double that." A nerve seemed to twitch in my father's jaw, and I could feel a heat rising in my cheeks. His unwavering faith in my brother had always overshadowed my presence, and it stung like an open wound. But now, as I spoke those potent numbers aloud, each statistic was like a strike upon a wall that had kept me invisible for far too long. The $50,000 my father had so freely showered upon my brother just days ago seemed like little more than a fleeting moment in time. My brother's face shifted from disbelief to something I hadn't expected, a flicker of anger, as if realizing that I had somehow ousted him from the pedestal he had long occupied. "Oh, come on," my brother finally interjected, his voice a strained whisper fighting to contain the venom behind it. "You always did have a knack for drama. Those numbers could be inflated. Who's to say any of it is real?" I could feel the tension in the room tighten like a noose, and a shiver crawled up my spine. Fear had no place here, not anymore. I had waited for this moment too long, enduring years of dismissal and ridicule, and now I was finally the one standing under the bright light of validation. "Want to see the documents?" I asked, my smile broadening, relishing the challenge. "I could show you the proof: clients, contracts, sales figures. Everything is meticulously laid out. Numbers don't lie, and neither do I." The air crackled with an electric tension as my brother shifted uncomfortably. "Documents can be forged," he muttered. "You know, people exaggerate figures all the time. It doesn't mean you're a success." I leaned back against the wall, the coldness of the paint pressing into my skin like a reminder of the battles I had fought. "You don't think you're the only one capable of greatness, do you?" I asked pointedly, infusing my words with a cold precision. "I've been waiting for my turn, and now that it's here, you'd rather cling to your past success than confront the truth." My father shifted in his seat, glancing from me to my brother and back again, confusion still painting his features. The clinking of the silverware on the dining table was the only sound breaking through the silence, a reminder of the lavish meals we had shared over the years, meals that always felt like a parade of my brother's achievements. I focused on my father's eyes, longing to see flickers of pride, my heart pounding with the realization that that pride was the one thing I had sought so desperately. "Look," my father finally said, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "Mia, we want you to be successful. This is surprising. We never doubted your potential, but this type of turnaround, it's just astonishing." "Surprising?" I echoed with a hint of incredulity. "You never once praised my endeavors. You buried your head in the sand when it came to anything I did. I was invisible, and now suddenly it's astonishing because my success diminishes your allegiance to my brother." My brother scoffed loudly, his frustration boiling over. "It's not about that, Mia. You're just—" He hesitated, searching for the right words to strike me down, his confidence wavering like a candle flickering in the wind. "You think you're better than me just because you got a little lucky." Luck. The word tasted sour on my tongue. "You think this is luck? You have no idea the late nights, the relentless grind, the rejection, the stress that had me questioning my purpose day in and day out. What have you ever sacrificed for your success?" My heart raced as I saw their expressions shift. My father's disappointment mingled with my brother's fury, each framing a clash of emotions that hung like an unseen storm cloud. Maybe you needed a little push, my father said finally, his voice trembling as he addressed my brother. Maybe I thought you did think, I interrupted, almost breathlessly, exhilaration seeping into my words. You chose to hand dollars, but I chose to build something of my own. This is my push. This is me finally breaking through what you cultivated for years. The belief that I wasn't worth the time or effort to be recognized as anything other than an afterthought. Silence enveloped us, and in that suspended moment I could hear my heartbeat resonating through the void, powerful and indomitable. My brother's mouth twisted in disdain. It was as if he were chewing on my words, trying to digest the bitter truth that perhaps I was no longer the forgotten daughter. I could sense the tide turning, and it felt exhilarating. I was coming alive within that space, every breath invigorating me. You want me to fail? I challenged, my voice emboldened. Is that what you want? Because I assure you that is not happening. The tables have turned, and I'm not going to let resentment stand in my way. Be full of yourself, my brother snapped, but I could see the cracks forming in his facade. The veneer of confidence he had worn so easily was now riddled with uncertainty, and my satisfaction swelled within me like a triumphant chorus. Maybe, but I'm full of success too, I shot back, each word punctuated with a fierce resolve. And it feels good, it feels amazing to stand here and finally own who I am, not as a shadow, but as someone worthy of respect and acknowledgement. Every glance exchanged now felt like a final judgment rendered. The truth clawed its way into their minds like a bear emerging from hibernation, ready to feast on the pretenses we had all clung to. My father's eyes narrowed, the lines on his face deepening as he grappled with the upheaval of our static dynamic, while my brother's brows furrowed in irritation, the grip on his ego loosening amid the unfolding revelations. I don't think this is the way to do it, sis, my brother muttered, a shadow of his former bravado lingering on the edge of his tone. You didn't have to come in here and smash my accomplishments to get your point across. Maybe I did, I replied firmly, feeling an unwavering conviction in my heart. You always had the spotlight on you, and while I was left searching for my place, I finally found it. I didn't even have to shatter your illusions, I merely had to showcase my own reality. The atmosphere surrounding us felt alive, buoyed by a mixture of confrontation and revelation, and I could almost taste the adrenaline coursing through my veins. I was no longer a passive observer in this family drama. I was the architect of my own narrative, and this moment would be the cornerstone of my journey ahead. The echoes of past neglect whispered through my mind, urging me to push forward, to break the vicious cycle of feeling overshadowed and unworthy. My father looked at me then, and for a fleeting moment I saw something shift within him, an understanding, maybe even a glimmer of pride. It's a lot to take in, he finally said, his voice softer, a blend of caution and curiosity. Mia, I just wish you had felt free to share all this with us before. Free? I scoffed lightly, the disbelief trailing off. Maybe I wasn't given the room to feel free. Maybe I had to fight for that space when I felt like no one was interested in my voices or views. No one ever asked me about my business, my dreams. You overlooked them entirely, assuming they weren't worth the trouble. Maybe you were right, my father conceded, the weight of his words almost crushing in their honesty. Maybe you both are right, and I'm just some fool who lost her way in the shadows of your success, my brother chimed in bitterly. It's what you do, right? You thrive, and we all suffer. Maybe if we actually acknowledged each other once in a while, this wouldn't sting so much. The change in his demeanor attracted my gaze. The raw honesty behind his words wasn't meant to strike me down, but rather an attempt to connect through shared vulnerability. It was revealing, an unexpected encore in this game of familial power that I had so fiercely taken control over. They were beginning to understand, if not fully accept, the narrative I had scripted for my redemption. I had spent countless years waiting for acknowledgement, struggling under the weight of neglect and comparison. Yet here I now stood, determined to redefine the roles we had played and to become not just a participant but the centerpiece of my own story. Yes, maybe we can work on that, I offered, my tone softer but firm. But it starts with honesty, not just about successes but everything, the failures too. I'm not asking for gratitude, I'm just asking for the opportunity to be seen the way you see everything else. And in that moment I did feel powerful. The tables had indeed turned. And as the heavy silence faded, a promise blossomed between us like a flower breaking through the frost. The chance to rewrite not only my future but their understanding, forging a family bond reshaped in the feisty furnace of honesty and acceptance. The burdens that had long tied my ideas to the ground and rendered me a whisper could finally unfurl into a voice of their own as the evening progressed. The discussions shifted, and I could feel the pulse of change vibrating through the air. Each word spoken around the elegantly laid dinner table resonated within me like a chorus of long overdue recognition. My father, the steadfast general of our family, could no longer deny my worth. The thick scent of roasted rosemary chicken mingled with the faint sweetness of candied carrots, but it was the taste of victory that lingered on my tongue, rich and intoxicating. Once I had been the invisible ink on a blank page, overlooked and disregarded, but tonight I was the bold headlines. I embraced my newfound position in our family, a rare sensation surging within me. No longer would I remain in the shadows that had once been my home. My brother watched closely, the light from the chandelier catching the glint of resentment and admiration sweeping across his face, a complex blend of emotions that felt almost electric. How was work today, Mia? My father placed down his fork, his eyes fixed on me, demanding and curious. In the past, this question would have been drowned out by the booming voice of my brother sharing his latest achievement. But tonight I sat at the head of the table, finding power in my voice as I replied with confidence. It was productive, actually. We finalized the marketing strategy for the new product launch, and my team is excited to present it next week. There was a moment of silence, a shocked stillness as my family processed my words. Their eyes darted among themselves like ping-pong balls, uncertainty swirling with an unspoken acknowledgement. The dim candlelight flickered, casting long shadows that faintly danced across the table, representing the ghosts of years I had spent in silence, waiting. I savored the moment, allowing their surprise to settle as I continued. I was thinking perhaps I could show you the presentation once it's ready. I would value your opinions. My brother coughed, his smile faltering. Oh really? You think you can just waltz in and take credit for things like that, Mia? You don't even know how to lead a team. There it was, the familiar retort, sharp as glass. The years of familial favoritism echoed in his voice, trying to suppress the newfound significance I had claimed. But triumph fueled my resolve, emboldening my response. I have led a team. You just didn't notice because you were too busy basking in the limelight, I shot back, meeting his gaze with unwavering determination. The air around us turned thick with tension, an invisible line drawn that divided our childhood into before and after. My heart raced with an exhilarating mixture of fear and hope. Mia, you have always been in your brother's shadow, my mother interjected softly, her tone more reflective than critical. It's only natural to seek his guidance. Her brow furrowed, worry etched across her face. A pang of guilt struck me momentarily, but it dissipated quickly. I had earned this moment, and I was no longer going to let anyone belittle my achievements. Actually, Mom, I've learned that standing in anyone's shadow only dims my own light, I replied, my voice even but laced with a newfound boldness. Tonight is different. This is my moment, and I've worked hard to be where I am. I deserve this recognition just like anyone else. The clinking of silverware became silent, the world beyond our walls vanishing into a haze as I embraced the simmering triumph racing through my veins. My father shifted in his chair, a storm brewing behind his eyes as he seemed to weigh my words carefully. More than anyone, I had longed for his acknowledgement. His approval had once felt like unattainable gold dust glimmering beyond my reach. So this is it then, he pronounced slowly, taking a sip from his wine glass, the deep red swirling like my emotions. You are prepared to challenge the flow we have established for so long. The words clung in the air, heavy and charged. He looked at me over the rim of his glass, his deep-set eyes studying the brushstrokes of my character, refining and bold. Absolutely, I asserted, clutching the edges of the table to steady myself, determination radiating. No longer will I watch from the sidelines while the spotlight shines only on my brother. You have taught us the importance of strength and resilience, and I have finally learned to wield mine. Strength, huh? My brother spat, unable to conceal the bitterness woven into his tone. Is that what you call this little performance? Strength is knowing your place, knowing who has the reins in this family. Knowing my place does not mean surrendering my dreams. It means forging my own path, I insisted, emotions boiling within me, years of simmering resentment finding their voice. You might have secured the reins, but I will build my own carriage, my own path forward. The tension quaked in the air as silence reigned again. I could see the flickering candlelight reflecting off my brother's clenched fists, inching towards a point of no return. I welcomed the storm brewing, ready to embrace whatever came next. I had ceased to be a mere casualty of favoritism, and I could finally see the resolve reshaping my world. Mia, my father began, his voice steadier as he slowly placed his wine glass down. I won't deny that your stance is commendable. Your journey has shaped you into someone I can respect. Caught off guard, a wave of emotion washed over me. Was he truly admitting to this shift? I hesitated but pressed on, trying to keep the momentum alive. Thank you, Father. I have spent countless hours honing my skills, crafting my decisions. And if you had noticed sooner, perhaps I wouldn't have spent so long in the shadows, would I? I hear what you're saying, he admitted, conceding ground. But this is more than just talent. This is about maintaining unity in our family. Your brother has his ways, his area of expertise. Unity doesn't mean oppression, I highlighted passionately, the words spilling out. You've always praised innovation but suffocated it within these walls. It's time to embrace the new, to let go of the past that shackles us. I still think you're being reckless, my brother interjected, but the bite in his tone lacked its usual venom. It was almost as if he was grasping at straws, the realization creeping in that things were changing and he might not possess the same control anymore. Perhaps it is you who fear recklessness, I mused, looking him squarely in the eyes. Maybe it is the collapse of your own perceived supremacy that has left you uneasy tonight. With each word, I felt a layer of my past lift, like clouds dispersing as the sun broke through. Their disbelief morphed into clarity before me, a transformation I could almost taste. I became the orchestrator of this new movement, blending shades of liberation and boldness into the family canvas they had long painted in monochrome. Eventually, the atmosphere softened some, and I could sense my father grappling with the shift, his eyes darting between surprise, contemplation, and reluctant acceptance. You're right, our conversation this evening has opened my eyes. Perhaps it is time to acknowledge that every member of this family has their strengths, unique gifts we have yet to fully appreciate. My heart swelled at his words, the warmth blooming like spring after a long winter. Then let us move forward as a family with an understanding that every voice matters, no more shadows. I can accept that, he finally admitted, the stoic expression on his face softening. A flicker of respect now sparkled in his eyes, and I knew at that moment everything had irrevocably changed. My brother remained silent, and I couldn't help but admire the mix of resentment and admiration sweeping across his face. I had turned the tide, and with a heavy heart I hoped he could find his own way through the shadows that he had so long relied upon. As the evening drew to a close, laughter erupted as conversations lightened, sweeping in a breeze of unity that had once felt unimaginable. I savored the jubilant noise, my family's voices twined with the rich richness of forgiveness and potential. No longer did I feel like an outsider trying to merge into a living tapestry of connection. I had firmly woven myself into the very fabric of our family story, unveiling the colors of my own narrative for all to see. The dark years of holding back my talents had transformed into luminous triumph, as they now recognized the architect of my own future. Their regret was woven into the very fabric of my satisfaction. Tonight, I was no longer a hidden chapter. I was the prologue to a new era, marked by the understanding that power flourishes when one steps beyond the periphery into the boldness of identity.